Hello and welcome to another developer diary. So this time around I want to be looking at how I've set up the upgrade system for the game. So let's dive on in. So a couple of things that you might notice immediately is there's a bit more UI appearing. And one of the things with this is actually what I've been doing is as I've been setting up the different carriages, going through and setting up their UI. So one of the things that the system sort of has is the different upgrades will unlock different capabilities. And so if I go to like the engine one at the moment I'm stopped. But if I go full speed, firstly, one of the things changed is there's actually a bit of an acceleration there up to speed. And you'll notice it's indicating there the engine power and the power to weight ratio. That actually matters now. So information like the weight of the carriages is factored in. As you get different upgrades, that will actually change the weight as well. And the engines that we've got, those are also getting affected by that. And the maximum speed we're able to do is going to be tied to that power to weight ratio. So if I then unlock a couple of upgrades, so in this case, I'm going to unlock ones here for the siphons and also for the storage. So if I tell it to unlock those, we'll notice immediately the power to weight ratio drops. The speed also drops because we have significantly more weight here, and we have those carriages. So when we unlock stuff, there is a visual mesh change. There is also a stat change. So in this case, the scrap collection rate, we can see sort of what the current average there is. If we look at the particular setup, then if we head to this one, so we can see we've got up to, able to go a little bit over the storage. That's something that's going to do a little bit of rebalancing of that as well. But we can see the total amount of storage that we've got there. And so that's the amount that we can store with all of the upgrades that we've got there unlocked. Now we could then, with this, if we take a look, we saw the engine power. We could actually switch back to the overview. With the engine power one, I could actually then go and unlock higher speeds. So I want to do that. So what I'm going to do is I will get rid of all of these, and then I'm going to add in the different engine ones. So we'll unlock all of the engine upgrades, not that booster yet. So when I go and unlock these, we'll notice our power has gone up significantly, the power to weight ratio has gone up, and as a result, our maximum speed has also gone up. And the engines are using the beefier visuals. And then as I add in additional carriages, we'll also see things change. So at the moment, we've just got regular sort of set of carriages that could spawn there. So if I add in another carriage, and we can see the set of ones that we've got. So that added in another battery one. And as I add in ones, our power to weight ratio shifts. But say I got here and made it that the only thing it could add in is a booster. So we'll add in booster carriage. So immediately massive jump in the power to weight ratio. If I go just all in and I'm going to chuck in 3 4-engine booster carriages, we'll hit our maximum speed. And so that's something where if we ran along to the back here, and I removed a few of the upgrades, so we don't have all of the upgrades enabled anymore now. So if I go all the way back here, we'll be able to see we have, and we can just see them a little bit further on, we've got those engine running right up the back there. So there we go. We've got our engine carriages. And so this is something where if I wanted to, I could chuck in a few more of the upgrades for this. So in terms of then how these are actually working, now there's obviously got a little bit of a bug there with where it's spawning in the UI, and that's okay. That's bugs are going to happen, and be able to be sorting those out. And it will have probably gone a little bit beyond the array, and that can mess up with unlocking the particular things. So in terms of how these upgrades actually work, if we take a look at the data for an upgrade, so within each upgrade, it has what behaviors it applies to, because not every upgrade is applicable to every behavior. So it allows me to filter ones, even some ones that are common to most of the carriages, like the guardrails, aren't applicable to things like the engine carriage. So this allows that to be something that it's targeting for a particular carriage. Then we have these effects. So this is how it changes the stats as we're actually running. So we have stuff like the collection chance. So for the siphon, there's a probability of it being able to pick stuff up. So it has a regular rate that it tries to pick something up, but that has a chance of failure. So early upgrades boost that chance of success. It has then things like, okay, changing the scan angle. So they have a particular angle that it can only pick up targets in. So it can then pick them up at a wider angle. We have stuff like the speed. So that's how rapidly it's able to pull something in, which that also actually affects whether it will try and pick something up. So if the train is going too fast for the current siphons that we have set up, it actually won't be able to pick things up. And then we have stuff like the storage capacity for that siphon car. And then we have other ones just for general storage cars. We have things like the engine power, the booster power, and the weight. So this is something where installing an upgrade will give you benefits, but it will increase the weight. So something like adding in the next upgrade for the siphon, that makes the train carriage 2,500 kilos heavier. You go to level 3, again, adds on 2,500, gives you the benefit of much faster speed, much larger storage capacity, and then we go to level 4, and because this is where it adds in the second story, so it's a huge increase in weight, 15,000 kilos, but it adds a full 15 meters a second to the siphon speed, meaning that it will always be able to siphon up things, and the storage capacity is doubled. So it gives a pretty significant boost. So it's something that's going to has a big cost in terms of the weight, but it gives a big benefit in terms of the amount that you can store. In terms of working out the weight of a carriage, the amount stored ties into that as well. So collecting it's actually going to be a thing where going and spending that scrap that you collect actually will mean you go faster. So you don't want to stockpile necessarily too much, because that's going to be something that is going to noticeably start to slow you down and cause you to need to invest more in booster carriages if you're wanting to do that. So there's going to be a nice sort of little bit of balancing that people will have to actually do there with that. So that's the different upgrades, and then so that's with the upgrades, and the behaviors have some common stuff. So every train carriage has a weight, and so with that, some of them are quite significant. So the battery carriages, your typical carriages, are generally going to be around sort of the 20,000 kilo weight. Ones like your storage carriage are actually a little bit lighter because they're largely just empty voids. Structurally intended to be strong, but empty voids nonetheless. Whereas ones like our solar and siphon ones tend to weigh quite a bit. Now the engines are very heavy, very much by intention, and these weights were not arbitrary. These weights were actually ones based upon me looking into various freight trains and things like that. That's where I got a rough sense of the sort of power levels, power to weight ratios. that was sort of what I used as my rough sort of basis there for what I wanted to go for with it. So that's why the engine, its starting weight is 150,000 kilos. So significant. The booster is a bit lighter because the booster doesn't do, as sort of, it's a bit more of a, not trying to be as aerodynamic, things like of that. It's a bit less filled design effectively. So it's a bit lighter, but it provides more power. So you'll get quite a noticeable benefit from adding in a booster there. It will give you quite a significant speed upgrade there for it. So in terms then of how those upgrades mechanically work, so if we go and take a look, every carriage, so this is the engine booster carriage, there's this refresh upgrades. So refresh upgrades is run anytime a carriage is spawned in. It's also run anytime something changes to actually unlock a new upgrade. And then for the effects, this is an approach that I generally like to go for, where the effect, if we go to it, it knows how to actually apply itself. So the thing that uses the effect passes in the relevant data, but the effect understands these concepts of adding, scaling, setting, and that's something where that means if I wanted to add in more options here for this, it's just a quick change within the upgrade side of things. So that's generally my preferred way of structuring ones like of this, because it then means, the carriages aren't needing to re-implement that logic themselves all of the time. And what it means is then these just have a very simple check they do. They set it to the base value and then run it through. Now, there's a couple of other things that are then sort of happening alongside this, because if we take a look at the siphon behavior, so siphon's one of the sort of bigger ones where there's a lot more changes that happen. So it has a lot of things that get changed in terms of scan angles, so a lot more parameters that it's updating. But it also has to differentiate between the type of targets it's able to pick up. So when it's actually looking, it does a specific search for small, medium, large objects, which the tile keeps track of that information. And it's checking to see, and this is a nifty way I worked out of how it actually can do this, it's using these active markers. So it never explicitly checks for an upgrade. What it looks for is if there is a particular marker present. So if we go and take a look at our carriage, so here's the combined carriage setup, and we've now got under this, we have markers, and for the siphon car, we have markers that are tied into different upgrade levels. And these markers indicate the type of what they are. Now, at the moment, this is only used by siphons. There's going to be other things I end up using it for. I'm expecting to use it for things like these lightning rods, because I want the lightning to specifically hit those. So it'll be used likely for that. But for now, these just get used for these individual siphon objects here. And then if we go to the top of this, where we've got all of the data, we can see, if we go and look at for the different siphons, it has markers. So what happens is those markers get activated when that particular section of the mesh is turned on. And then in our code here, we are able to retrieve those markers. So then we can check, okay, well, is it a medium marker? And the scrap pool we want to pick from is medium scrap. So it gives us a different way of approaching it. That means I don't need to ever in this specifically check, is X or Y unlocked? It's just because it's tied into the visuals. So it means it's all effectively configured in data, which is a really, really handy way of setting it up. It means that with something like this, it'd be very easy for me to add in different markers on different locations. And each siphon largely functions independently. It finds its own targets. Once it's done that, it will then pull the targets into itself. And so that works really quite well. So that's sort of helping on that side, and that's something where if we then go and take a look, we'll be able to see that if I start us moving, so it has changed now where the only way to actually start it moving is via this. So that's fine. But initially what I will see is we're only picking up small scrap. So if we go here, you can see it's managing to pick up small bits of scrap, but it will actually be struggling because of the speed we're going. So that's okay. What I can do is if I come along and unlock the upgrades, now we see we've got large objects, medium, small, and you'll see there's actually a few more objects in there, and they're all getting siphoned up into there. So it's able to be pulling along stuff a lot better now. It will have already hit the point where it's full, so I haven't done a balancing pass yet on the amounts of storage, for example. It's just got the setup so that it's able to actually bring storage in. But if I added in some extra carriages, then it'll start pulling the information in, we'll start pulling the resources in, because with this, so the other thing it will also do is when it has extra carriages, those actually level out their storage. So it's going to be regularly doing a bit of a rebalancing where the storage gets leveled out. So that's a very intentional thing so that you don't have essentially one or two things that only have everything stored in them. You'll actually get an even spread throughout the train. So there'll be a regular sort of leveling that happens. That happens for storage. It will also happen once it's set up for the actual energy, for the sort of power level there. And we've got that happening in terms of when it refreshes these stats. Because for the UI, we need a lot of stat information now. So it goes through and it is working out for every carriage what storage it's got, what's using, the power, the weight, which factors in storage for that carriage. That overall power to weight ratio is how we determine our max speed. So it now has these speed bands configured that it's able to work out which speed band we're currently in. And then the storage, it goes through and levels that out. So it works out and the way it does it is it's kind of a two-step process. It works out the storage used, and then once it's worked out the storage used, it checks to see, because that's using a percentage then, and that could then mean we have a little bit of underflow or overflow, because just floating point error. So that's why as it's going through, it keeps track of the total amount that's now stored. And then if there was any delta, it finds the first one that has some storage available. And it then goes and adds it into that. Just so that, because over time you could get a very, very, very small reduction there, and that would not be good. So I want to just try and avoid that happening. So that's working really quite well with it. We have things like the visuals, everything like that changing. And if I switch this, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add in every single upgrade except for the emergency retrieval, because it has some special case logic. So I'm going to leave that out. And I'll also remove guardrails. So what I'm going to do is we're going to run it, and then we're going to switch this to being a fully upgraded train. So carriage info, let's go to full. And we can see your overview-wise, it'll get to probably having a fair amount of scrap stored. We can see sort of the speed climbing up there. Power is obviously not something that's currently being done because we don't have the solar or battery cars running at the moment. Those are the next ones on the list. So with that, what I can do is if I unlock all the upgrades, then we can suddenly start storing a lot more. We can see we're accumulating a lot more really, really rapidly. If we go to our carriage info, then we can see where we're sitting power to weight ratio and speed wise. We'll also see, and this is something that happens, you notice as I jumped, this screen changed. So if we're on the carriage specific info and switch screen or switch carriage, it'll automatically update. So we can see whatever the current information is there. So we can see it's showing all of our storage, which is great. So there's no specific screens yet for the solar or battery ones. Those will be coming in, so I will be adding in ones of those soon, and then there'll be the upgrade purchasing UI. So all of that is on its way in, and that's actually going to be the next focus is going to be getting the solar side of things going in, because that's going to impact on the maximum amount of thrust the engines will be able to produce. And every carriage, much like how every carriage has a weight, every carriage will also have a level of power usage. So that's something that will be coming in next. And then there'll be the purchasing UI for the upgrades. So that's going to be a big thing. And at that point, then I'm probably going to switch back to focusing on visuals. So start actually doing a pass in terms of getting things textured, doing another visual pass. There's a few post-processing things I've got in mind that I want to test out, see how those are going to work. But got a few things I want to be doing there. Tweaking more of the visuals here for the screens. Those screens are actually one bit of UI. What I've done is those are using this approach I've used before of essentially having a UI stage. The reason for that is that makes it really, really easy for me. I actually tick this at a particular rate. So the carriage UI has a frames per second that it updates at. So this only updates at 10 frames per second. That's helped a lot with performance side of things, because otherwise it's just running really rapidly, burning a lot of resources, and it doesn't need to. So I've reduced that so it only updates at a controllable rate that I manage. And by having it there as a separate thing, it means that screen, what I'm going to end up being able to do is having that screen actually be emitting light and it feeling like a brighter sort of screen. It'll take on lighting and things like that from the world, which I wouldn't otherwise get as nicely or reliably at all with World Space UI. So that's the plan there for those next steps. So that's the immediate plans with this. It's coming together really well. I think it's still probably about sort of 6 or so weeks away, I think, from being done. I'll see once I get to the balancing stage, that's going to be a really crucial part of it. But it's coming together really nicely. And I'm also going to, at times, I'll be sharing sort of screenshots and videos, things like that on my Twitter as well. So if you're wanting to see ones as they're sort of happening, that'll be something to be checking out. Thanks, folks. Hope you found the video interesting. If you have, chuck in a like and subscribe. If you've got any questions, chuck in a comment. And I'm really, really looking forward to sharing more of the updates for this going forward. There's a lot of cool things that I've got planned, so I can't wait to have the chance to be sharing those with everyone. But until next time, bye.